I like looking at you and you're like, I'm not going to cut that out. Okay. You're ugly. Why are you surprised that you failed that test? Because no one else is. Are you dating who? It's so good. I am glad that you found someone because we were getting worried with you having that face and all. I'm glad you asked, actually. It turns out that you do look fat in those jeans. Have you ever said something that as it was leaving your mouth that you just already wanted to take it back? Like if you could just reach out and grab those words and just put them right in your pocket so they don't fall on someone else's ears. Conversely, have you ever wanted to say something to someone, but for whatever reason, whether that be fear of their response or lack of confidence or your social anxiety, you just didn't? You look really beautiful today. Or hey, it looks like all of that studying really did pay off. Good job on getting those grades up. I know it was tough, but you did it, and I'm proud of you. I don't know if anyone's told you this, but I saw how you went and sat at that kid's table during lunch when he was all by himself, and I just wanted to tell you that it took a lot of courage, and I saw it, and it inspired me. Or I know that you're nervous, but I just wanted to tell you from the bottom of my heart that I believe in you. And no matter what happens, I'll be your number one fan. Words can be incredibly powerful. And as it turns out, our interactions with other people, including the exchange of words, is always in the back of our mind, literally. In 1997, a research team from Washington University wanted to use PET scanners to observe brain activity. And looking at a collection of brand new pictures of the brain that technology had previously not allowed for, the team set out to investigate one question. Are there regions of the brain that are involved in all types of brain activity? In summarizing their findings in his book, Social, psychologist Matthew Lieberman noted that they were asking the wrong question. So later, the research team flipped their initial questions on its head, reframing it as this. What, if anything, is active in the brain when someone is not trying to do a task? The results were revealing. The team found that there's a particular set of regions that consistently activate when you're not attempting to do a cognitive task, and that just as consistently deactivate once you focus your attention on something. Meaning when you're not focused on reading your Instagram feed or watching a YouTube video or studying for a test, listening to music, whatever it may be, a certain part of your brain lights up. And when you turn your focus back to those things, that same part of your brain deactivates. They ended up calling this the default network. It's the part of your brain that is active when you're not consciously focusing on a task. So what's it do? At first, neuroscientists assumed that the default network just comes on when you're thinking about nothing, but it turns out that your brain is hardly ever actually thinking about nothing. Even without a specific task, your brain tends to remain highly active. So what's it thinking about? Lieberman realized that this background hum of activity tends to focus on a small number of targets, thoughts about other people, yourself, or both. The default network, in other words, seems to be connected to social cognition. Meaning in our downtime, no matter how brief it may be, our thoughts are flooded with people, interactions that we've had, and situations that we might want to revisit. Or in short, for our purposes, your brain defaults to think about words said to you, words you said to others, or words left unsaid. That's why you have imaginary conversations in the shower where you just own that guy who really embarrassed you earlier. Or talk to yourself on the car ride home from school where you just say all the things to your teacher that you wish you had the courage to say just hours earlier. It's why even though you may try, you can't help but think about those rude things that your classmates said about you. Or you can't shake that interaction that you had with your crush where you really wanted to say what you felt or how you felt, but you just didn't. So with that in mind, we're left with a question. If our words are rattling around in other people's brains, how do we want to leave people after a conversation? Do you want your words to be life-giving, to encourage and lift up other people, or do you want them to be death-dealing, to belittle or tear down or destroy? It was Dale Carnegie all the way back in the 20s who said, there is no such thing as a neutral exchange. You leave someone either a little better or a little worse. So which one do you choose? We've seen throughout history the power that words have. They have the ability to inspire change and call us to action. Winston Churchill's words come to mind. In a commencement address at a boarding school, Churchill stood up to speak to the crowd of young boys, and understanding that his country was still in the midst of World War II with the threat of Nazi Germany still looming very large in the minds of his countrymen, Churchill said this: "Never give in, never give in, never, 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 never. In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense." It's not the most elegant of speeches, but considering the context, it is powerful. Or think of that iconic line from Ronald Reagan. When the Berlin Wall divided Germany both physically and ideologically, in a speech given in front of that wall, Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Or in the height of the civil rights movement of the 60s, the words of Martin Luther King Jr. "I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Doesn't that just activate something in you, stir something up inside of you? It is the power that words have. They can move you from a place of apathy to action, from indifference to involvement. They can pull us up to a higher level, motivating us to live up to our calling of being an image bearer of the living God. Words are incredibly powerful, but power is a double-edged sword. What can be used to build up can also be used to destroy. Words can be used to move an entire nation to view other human beings not as souls to be loved, but as enemies to be feared. Words can tear open an emotional wound and just pour salt directly into it. They can level a person's trust, they can erode confidence, and fracture relationships. And it's no wonder that the philosopher Dallas Willard said, "The mouth is the main thoroughfare of evil in human life." Just think about the problems that you have with people right now. Chances are someone has said a careless word that they didn't even spare a thought on, but you held it in your mind for days. Or a teacher of yours belittled you for not knowing the right answer, or not doing well on a quiz or that project or whatever it is, and you ended up losing confidence in yourself in regards to that subject. Or how many times has the drama in your life been a result not of what someone did, but of what they said? And add to that the mix of the mediums of Snapchat and Instagram and texts, where you're no longer communicating face to face with the image of God and the person across from you, but over servers and screens, allowing the nuances of conversation and body language to be lost, often resulting in miscommunication and misunderstanding. Not to mention how we can just simply be a lot more mean when we don't have to look in the other person's eyes. We can say what we really think because we no longer have to deal with the fallout of having to see those thoughts impact that person in real time. And even if we do let something accidentally slip, which is inevitably going to happen, no matter how much we want to put those words back in our mouth, we just can't. But that doesn't mean that we don't try, at least. We will apologize profusely and say stuff like, "Oh, I was just joking," or I didn't really mean it. But you said it. So on some level, you had to have meant it. And that's the problem. Often, it's been said that the eyes are the window of the soul, and if we stick to that metaphor and we connect different parts of the body to deeper parts of our humanity, then I think it can be said that the mouth is the window of the heart. For better or for worse, what goes on in here is not kept secret. It is eventually revealed through our speech. Jesus, ever the expert on the human condition, even says as much. In Luke chapter 6, starting in verse 43, "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, or that can be translated the treasury or the bank of your heart. And an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. It seems that those careless words aren't just a slip of the tongue. They're a slip of the heart, revealing what we truly do think of other people. So after simplifying our heart, centering ourselves around life in the kingdom of God, living under the rule and reign of King Jesus, how do we be good trees? How do we make sure that what comes out of our mouths isn't evil, but in alignment with the goodness of God? To use our words not to serve our own need for control or our desire to be liked, but to serve the person across from us in love. We do that with the practice of simplicity. More specifically, simplicity of speech. And if you've missed the past few weeks, we're in our fall practice for this year. You know that we are practicing the way of Jesus together in Southeast Texas. And for the next few weeks, we will be diving deeper into the practice of simplicity. If you're behind on our messages, I just recommend you go back and click to the Propaganda of More or Simplicity of the Heart and watch those in order for this to make a little more sense to you. And hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. But just to remind you what simplicity is, it is an inward reality that results in an outward lifestyle. And the definition that we're using a lot is this: limiting the number of our possessions, expenses, activities, and social obligations to a level where we are free to live joyfully in the kingdom with Jesus. Or to get more specific in regards to this message, simplicity of speech is a disciplined attempt to bring our speech into alignment with Jesus' heart. Notice I didn't say talk less or to talk more. We are to bring our words into alignment with the heart of Jesus. So whether that means talk less or talk more is dependent solely on you. If you're an extrovert, an 8 on the Enneagram, or you're a D on the DISC, aligning your speech with Jesus' heart might mean that you need to be a little more slow to speak. You might need to stop interrupting people, dominating the conversation, or just bulldozing over those who are a little quieter than you. If you're an introvert or a 5 on the Enneagram or a C on the DISC, aligning your speech with Jesus' heart might mean that you need to speak up more. You are just as much made in the image of God as the person who talks more than you, and there is value in your words, and we miss your voice in the church. Whatever your personality is, though, the goal is to manifest the inward character of Jesus through your speech. And as we'll see, there were times when Jesus spoke up. He told people what was on his mind with carefully selected, well thought out speech. But there were also times when Jesus held his tongue. There were times when he could have interrupted or corrected or rebuked, but instead he remained silent. So in modeling our lives after Jesus, we're going to have 2 goals in regards to this practice. We want to talk like Jesus, and then we want to don't talk like Jesus. I'll give you a word on each. So first, talk like Jesus. If you have a Bible in front of you, Mark chapter 12, I'm going to start in verse 13. Later they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. They came to him and said, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You're not swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right that we should pay our imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we?" To be clear, it does sound like the Pharisees at first are flattering Jesus. They're not. So back in the day, you didn't get owned in a quote tweet on Twitter. Your ideas went to go duke it out in the public square. And the goal was to completely silence your opponent, to have such a good, airtight argument on your view of life that you shut down the opposition altogether. And that's what the Pharisees are getting at here. They are setting up a trap in order to discredit Jesus. Because if he says, hey, don't pay taxes, he is encouraging poor citizenship and law breaking. But on the other hand, if he says do pay taxes, then he is advocating for Rome's oppression of his people. So what's his response? Jesus knew their hypocrisy. "Why are you trying to trap me?" he asked. "Bring me a denarius or a coin and let me look at it." And they brought him the coin, and he asked them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Then Jesus said to them, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's." And they were amazed at him. Notice that Jesus seemed to have just the right word for just the right time, as he did several times throughout the Gospels. It wasn't that he was just a smart dude, even though the case can be made that he was the most intelligent man to ever live. It's that he knew exactly how to speak to people right where they're at, recognizing the intention behind the question, the heart behind the words, and the soul underneath it all. He always seemed to know exactly when to teach, ignore, correct, encourage, all of it. Jesus was just able to meet people on their own levels of maturity, intelligence, and understanding. Could you imagine being able to use your words like Jesus did? Not as a weapon to destroy or as a tool to inflate your own ego or to manipulate another person's perception of you, but to give the person that you're talking with a gift, to the exact word that they need to hear in the exact moment that they need to hear it. Something that just speaks to the image of God within that person that you're talking to and brings out not the worst, but the best in that person. Or to put it in the language of Proverbs 25, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and settings of silver. That's our goal, just to discipline ourselves to talk like Jesus. But we have another goal. Don't talk like Jesus. Turn a few chapters to the right in Mark 15. If you have a Bible that puts Jesus' words in red, you'll notice something in all four eyewitness accounts of his life. The closer you get to Jesus' trial, beating, crucifixion, the amount of red that you see starts to drop heavily. If you have a Bible with you, just flip back to where we just were in Mark chapter 12 to where we are now in Mark 15. There are a lot less words in red. You know what that means? That Jesus is choosing when to be silent. And at this point in the story, Jesus has just been arrested. He's been put through a sham of a trial. He's been condemned to death by crucifixion, which is a Roman way of torture. And he has been beaten by those who are supposed to be in authority. And this is where we pick it up. Mark 15, starting in verse 1. Very early in the morning, remember, after a death sentence and a beating, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, who was the Roman governor at the time. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "You've said so," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of." How differently already Jesus is than us when we're being accused of things. He didn't jump to his own defense. He didn't state his case. He didn't even plead for his life, which he was about to lose via torture. But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. So notice the last line in each of our passages here. The Pharisees were amazed at what Jesus did say, and Pilate, the Roman governor, was amazed at what Jesus didn't say. There is power in both, and there is a time for both. Not only was his silence a way of quiet rebellion for Jesus, a non-violent act of defiance in the face of political injustice, but it also reveals this deep, deep trust in God the Father. Not trust in his own words to liberate him, not trust in the words of his friends who could have came to his aid and their testimony could have set him free, but silent trust in the will of God. Peter, who was likely watching all of this go down after denying Jesus 3 times, later said this in a letter. "If you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he didn't retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly." So simplicity of speech is talking like Jesus, yes, but it's also learning to don't talk like Jesus so we may too abandon outcomes to God. Can I be just transparent here? I got permission. This is not easy to do, really, and this learning to discipline your speech might be one of the greatest challenges that you face as a disciple of Jesus in your time, especially in the age of the internet when your unfiltered thoughts can be immediately zapped into another person's front right pocket in a matter of seconds. If we are going to be salt and light to the world living in the kingdom of God, then we are going to have to be radically different than the culture around us. Not spewing hate as soon as we catch wind of something that we disagree with or that makes us angry. Not canceling somebody for their own unfiltered thoughts made in haste years ago. And not using technology as another avenue for gossip and backbiting, but being wise with our words, knowing when we should speak up and when we just simply need to shut up. But again, this is a very tall task. James, the half-brother of Jesus, even gives us a glimpse into the challenge that's set before us. In James 3 says this, "Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they're so large and driven by strong winds, they're steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and it itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be." And then echoing kind of Jesus's teachings that we just read a little bit earlier, can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? Can my brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt water produce fresh water. Saltwater spring. Out of the abundance of the mouth, the heart speaks. I've been wounded by words, as I'm sure that you have as well. If you know any of my story, that you know that I went to Bible college for about 4 years to get my degree to do exactly what it is I'm doing now, which I'm very thankful for. But it took me about 2 years, a little under that, after graduating college to be able to get a job as a youth pastor. For whatever reason, application after application, week after week, I just got rejected by churches, and it felt like nobody wanted me whatsoever. So during this span of time, I wasn't clinically diagnosed, but according to WebMD, I'll say that I had a pretty mild case of depression. I had to move back home with my parents and live with them because I couldn't afford the rent, because I didn't have a job, because no one would hire me, right? And this whole time, this purpose that I felt like that God had put deep in my heart to be a pastor and to preach his word was just not happening. Something that I've been dreaming of since high school just wasn't coming to fruition. So I had this deep, already internal turmoil going on that says that you're not good enough, that you're not living up to what God has called you to be, and that you probably never will. And day by day, it was just eating me alive. So at the same time, I have an older brother who, about the age of 16, started to get heavily addicted to opioids, painkillers, stuff like that. And it's kind of caused a big rift in our family and just a lot of division, and has tore some things apart relationally. And there's been times when he's come home a little high or a lot high, and has tried to, fist fight my dad or my mother or me or my younger brother. And I can say that there are those times which we've had those altercations that I did not speak like Jesus and I did not act like Jesus. And one of those times in particular, I remember as we were waiting for the cops to come down the road after a pretty violent interaction. I remember my older brother looking at me and saying, "You're supposed to be a pastor." And that there was something deep down in me that not only was he right in the sense that, man, I'm supposed to be different in the way that I speak to him and act, but it spoke to a deep wound in me where I was feeling like I am supposed to be a pastor and I'm not, like nobody wants me, it tore something open inside me and just doused it with salt, and it hurt. And I am sure that if we gave you the chance to share your story in front of a camera or just sitting across from one another in a coffee shop, that you could share similar stories of words being used as weapons against you that cut open deep, deep wounds, some that still aren't even healed. We can speak from experience how words have hurt, but honestly, how we have hurt others with words as well. But on the opposite side of that coin, I've also been deeply moved by words. I've been filled with love and inspiration and direction and hope and so on. Some of my best moments in life come after words have lifted me up to a seemingly new horizon. I think of graduating high school all of those years ago. My father, who is relatively quiet, a man of few words, when I graduated, handed me a letter tucked inside of an envelope. And it was just filled with words of love and affirmation and encouragement as I completed a stage of my life and was looking forward to a next one. Or I think of April 22nd, 2017, as the love of my life stood across from me and we held hands. And after already reading each other our vows and making public promises amidst friends and family, I got to hear her say the two simple words that have changed my life forever: I do. Or I think of last year. After weeks of anticipation, I sat with my wife Jolie as the ultrasound technician showed us our baby on the projector screen. And not knowing what we would be having and secretly hoping for a daughter, I can still feel my heart melt like it did when I heard that technician say the words, "It's a girl." Words can and should move us from our depths into new heights, and that is the goal as we learn to follow Jesus together. Not to gossip or start drama or to dismantle another person's ego or their sense of self-worth, but to use our speech in a way that aligns with the character of Jesus of Nazareth. And this is where our experiments in simplicity come in. So, this is where you can take this vision of yourself becoming someone who uses speech for the good of the kingdom, and you manifest it into the world by the way that you act. So the past few weeks, we've kept it very simple. If you've been following along, we've only given you one experiment that you can try out in your life. But this week will be a little bit different. I know that there are a whole slew of personality types that are watching this video, with each person having different needs than the person before them or after them. So simplicity of speech for you might look wildly different than it does for your friend or your parent or whatever it may be. Some of you do need to talk less. Some of you need to be more careful with your words. Some of you need to be slow to speak, thinking about what you're going to say. And some of you need to talk more, to join the conversation and let people know what's actually on your mind, to offer up the wisdom that you may be hiding in here because you're shy or socially awkward or anxious. So let me walk you through a few experiments. And again, just like with everything, this is just invitation to you. I am not trying to force anything on you or whatever. I really just fully believe that following Jesus is the best way to live your life because it's the way that has been meant to live since the creation of humanity. And I'm inviting you to discover that truth for yourself, follower of Jesus or not. So we have 8 experiments in total. You can do all of them if you want to, or you can just handpick a few and try them out. But just do as you can, not as you can't. You want to start where you should, not where you want to be. Start where you want to be, not where you should. We'll cut that out. We'll add it in. Do as you can, not as you can't. Here we go. And if you experiment with one of these and it doesn't work out, that's totally fine. You can try something else. The important part is that you practice simplicity of speech along with us. So you can write these down if you're taking notes, or just, keep them up here. But number 1, listen to the Spirit of God within you before immediately responding. So 1 to 3 times a day, just make it a point to, before you talk or respond to that email or that text message, just to be quiet for a little bit, listen to the Spirit of God within you, and then just kind of go from there. You're not responding in haste or in anger or anything like that. This also might mean that you need to get comfortable with the silence between you and another person. I know personally, when there is an awkward silence between someone and myself, that often that's when I do say words that I regret, because I'm just trying to fill that uncomfortable space with anything. But if you just stop and listen to the Spirit of God within you, hopefully you can start to speak from a place of the Spirit. Number 2, don't try to control or coerce or convince people of anything. Try to make it through a conversation without having an agenda. That means you're not going out with coffee with a friend and just trying to get them to help you with your project or give you the answers to your math test or whatever it may be. But instead, you're just being there present with them, with the image of God and the person across from you, loving them, listening to them, being there with them. Number 3, when you want to stay silent, speak up. You can either chime in vocally, or you can do as my father did and just take your time, write out a letter, and hand it to someone like that. Number 4, think about 2 words that you want to be used to describe your speech. So whatever you want people to say about you when they're, hey, how would you describe this person? What do you want them to say? Do you want them to say that you're gentle or wise, or that you're very caring or encouraging or full of love or patience? What do you want people to think when you leave a conversation? Think of 2 words, pray for those things, and try to put those things into practice in your speech. Number 5, don't speak for a predetermined time. This goes hand in hand with another practice from the way of Jesus called silence and solitude. You can take a day or a morning or an hour, 30 minutes, the car ride to school or back, whatever, and just don't speak. This might be uncomfortable for a lot of you because we are constantly digitally distracted, whether it's by a YouTube screen in front of us or constant endless scrolling. So when you actually do get silent, you're going to notice a lot of your fears and anxieties and your thoughts about yourself and other people that are uncomfortable, that you haven't dealt with and pushed down. They're going to start to come to the surface. But that could be a very good thing, because not only are you listening finally to the Spirit of God within you, but to your own problems that you haven't resolved yet. So see what silence brings to your mind when you put this one into practice. Number 6, abstain from a speech practice for a set time, such as interrupting others, yelling at a rude driver, or giving your opinion when it's not asked. Do this for a day or a class period or 3 days, whatever you want. Set a time and stick to it. This is one that I personally, in preparation for this whole series, practiced this one. It did hurt for a little bit. It was not easy. I tried not to give my opinion unless someone asked about it. And that day we talked about politics, masks, and vaccines, just casual, not hot topic issues. But what I noticed within me is that when you don't try to interject your own opinion when it's not asked for, you can actually listen to the other side of a person, try to get their own point across, and you can also cultivate peace within a conversation because you're not adding fuel to the fire by just interjecting with no, you're wrong, or whatever it may be. Number 7, try to answer a question today, tomorrow, whatever, with a simple yes or no. Or as the Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't be like, no, I'm going to do this, I swear, I promise, whatever. Just say yes. And then notice, as you continually make this a practice in your life, how people start to trust you for things. And lastly, throughout this whole thing, just listen to what's happening inside of you. Your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and that same presence that raised Christ from the dead is living within you. What do you think would happen if you started to actually give room for that Spirit to speak? To end, I want you to think of the kind of person who is just kind when you sit in their presence. Someone who isn't plotting their next move, who doesn't want anything from you, who isn't about to trash somebody who is not in the room. They're not manipulating you or your perception of them. Now imagine becoming that kind of a person through practice. Or imagine if our entire youth group started to become those kind of people through practice, a whole group of teenagers, not stirring up anything, but love, blessing the image of God in the person across from them. Could you just imagine what that would be like? Or how your family dynamic would change, or your school would change? That is life in the kingdom. And I'm just inviting you to see what it is all about. Simplify your speech and live life to the full, imitating Jesus, your Savior, your Messiah, your Rabbi, your teacher. I love you. Grace and peace to you. Bye. That was Reagan there. Tear down this wall.